Hi, my name is Jordan Granholm, and this is the presentation on my draft lesson plan for my research paper, which was on the Plains Indians conflict. Ended up choosing this topic, as I said earlier, in the class, just because I think it's one that often gets overlooked. It's kind of in almost an awkward spot in terms of the timeline teaching this content in the school year, and I think it's something that's just kind of glossed over when in reality. It's a pretty important subject, not only just obviously for the course of U.S. history, but also for the end of course test as well, as it has its own whole entire standard with three substandards that do get covered on the test. So it's important to learn a little bit more about, to get a little more involved with the class. So just wanted to learn a little bit more about it, and this is my draft lesson plan for that topic. So background information, as I was just saying a little bit ago, the course is U.S. history, which at my school, in my school district, that is 11th grade. The main standard is SSUSH 12. Evaluate how westward expansion impacted the Plains Indians and fulfilled Manifest Destiny. I said that part, that final part especially, it's in kind of a unique spot because the Plains Indians conflicts lasts years post Civil War, but then we talk about Manifest Destiny pre Civil War, so it's kind of in almost in an awkward spot. The substandards that go with this for the research paper, I chose all three just because the three broad ones um, that go with this are still important in the context of this particular topic. So substandard A, examine the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, including the use of immigrant labor. B, evaluate how the growth of Western population and innovations in farming and ranching impacted the Plains Indians. And then C, resistance, Plains Indians' resistance to Western expansion and the consequences of that resistance. So all three of those are important in this context of the topic as a whole, which is why I wanted to focus on it, especially as I said, I'm hitting on this a lot, but especially because of the timing of this content. Me and my colleagues that also teach U.S. history, we go through this relatively quickly, and I don't think we do it justice, and it's something important to analyze deeper. So the main guiding question that I would cover in this lesson, whether it's a day or two, which is usually the timing that we give generally, and this, how did westward expansion and the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad impact the Plains Indians, and how did they resist? So that's kind of the starting point, is that the Transcontinental Railroad opens the door almost for this mass exodus or movement out west, and then that impact that it had on the Plains Indians already living there. So direct instruction to basically almost introduce or start off the topic would just be, brief lecture, visual presentation on the impact of westward expansion, maybe recapping some westward expansion stuff we've already talked about earlier in the school year, with just a main focus on the Transcontinental Railroad, the use of the immigrant labor, where you have Irish in the east, Chinese in the west, eventually the meetup point, and just talk about the Transcontinental Railroad and then the impacts of that. And then as a result of that, we see this movement out west. We see the Homestead Act, which really encouraged settlers to head out west. The impact of a lot of the new farming techniques, barbed wire, the ranching, the impact that it had on Plains Indians and the free range in buffalo, and a lot of that larger impact that we see because of that, kind of how it all snowballs out. One thing leads to another, and then as the result is then the Plains Indians' response, the resistance we see, and then eventually the consequences of those resistance, like the massacre of Wounded Knee, Battle of Little Bighorn, and so on. So it all snowballs basically one after the other, that this happens because of this, and then so on. So basically just an overview, introduction, recap of some of that stuff. And then the student activities would be Gallery walk or stations, just a station rotation that would include more in-depth analysis of these topics like the Transcontinental Railroad, first-hand accounts or primary and secondary sources on settler expansion, maybe the Homestead Act, other things that helped encourage that expansion, farming techniques, and then also the analysis of the Plains Indians resistance. So looking at leaders, excerpts about the resistance, about something like the massacre of Wounded Knee, and just more of an in-depth analysis to what we kind of introduced. Graphic organizer would be used that the students would fill out. They would discuss their answers, and there would be sections that they would complete, and then there would be a wrap-up that they would essentially almost conclude with either a newspaper article, digital slide, something that just answers the guiding question and kind of ties it all in together and wraps everything up. The assessment would be that graphic organizer. It would be a formative assessment, or then that final concluding project that they created as a way to just wrap everything up. And as the students are working, I'd be just, checking in, walking around, checking for understanding, providing clarification when necessary, helping the students kind of work through the assignment. The resources that would be required for this assignment would be the printouts for all the stations, so primary sources, maps, photos, whatever the graphic organizers that the students would be completing, the smartboard for the direct instruction, or PowerPoint, any devices that the students may need with completing something on a laptop or paper if it's a hard copy, and then the rubric for the formative assessment that would be used for this. Possible differentiation for this lesson would be guided notes for the direct instruction or sentence stems for students who need writing or language support. Choice, which I find this is very helpful for all students in general, giving them options to choose their assessment, whether they want to do a written article or a slide, or maybe they come up with another idea, something unique like a podcast recording. I'm very flexible in a lot of this because I feel students are more motivated when they have a say in producing their work. Offer different audio versions of certain primary sources, or maybe simplified readings for students that are struggling, and then also it could work pair any English language learners with IEP students to help kind of have collaborative, supportive peers in that work. So those are just some brief examples of differentiation that it could use for that. And then anything else to kind of just help all students reinforce their learning. And this final wrap-up slide, this would almost be like just a sample conclusion slide that I want to throw in, basically that I put at the end, like kind of recap that essential question that we talked about, discuss the key takeaways that we went over the course of this lesson, and then maybe as an exit ticket or as something at the conclusion of this lesson, because this would obviously take more than one day. This would be a lot of information to do, to cover in just one class period. Maybe like a final wrap-up question or discussion, trying to connect things for students, helping them relate that past historical topic to present day issues. So that's my rough draft of my Plains Indians lesson. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to any feedback.